Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto did dirty to Mikoto to join Anbu part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto woke up from his long nap. He yawned, rubbing his belly sighing at the large meal he had the night before. He got up and took a shower, and got dressed in a pair of black shorts and put on a regular high-collared dark blue shirt. Mikoto was putting him in the academy. He complained that he didn't want to go, and almost told her that he was Anbu and didn't need to go to the academy with a bunch of brats. So he had to get up really early. Looking at the clock he noticed it was 6:34 a.m. Damn, I took too long in the shower. He thought, jumping out the window, being careful not to wake anyone, and being an Anbu with training in stealth, made it easy for him. He appeared on the windowsill of the Hokage's office and opened the window, and searched the desk for the academy enrollment application Mikoto sent here. He found it and burned it with a small fire jutsu, and just as the last of the embers disappeared, the Hokage entered the office. Naruto-kun, I thought I felt your chakra signature up here, so do you mind telling me what you're doing up here? He said, sniffing the air a little, smelling burnt cinders. What did you burn? He said, crossing his arms. Naruto lowered his head. Mikoto-san is thinking of enrolling me into the academy, and what I burned was the application for it. He said, telling the truth. The Hokage thought about this. Well, good, but you could have just come to me and told me of this. Now she's going to be suspicious of how come you didn't get into the academy. He said, thinking more. Hey Naruto-kun, do you want your position in Anbu to go completely public, like Itachi-kun's and Kakashi-kun's were? The village would become more feared knowing of your identity and the power you withhold. The Hokage asked his young charge. Naruto looked puzzled at the Hokage. You want to use me to make the village feared? I don't know. I would like to stay in the shadows, where I do my best, he said, declining the offer of publicity. The Hokage shook his head, chuckling to himself. Oops, he said, digging into his robe. Naruto froze. Oops, what do you mean by that, old man? He said as his Sharingan came to life, as ki flooded the room. That's when Naruto heard a voice. Isn't it obvious, Ninjin? The man already went against your wishes, before you even knew. The demonic voice said, shocking Naruto as he had never heard the voice before. I'm sorry Naruto-kun, but you're already in the next issue of the bingo book. It's already shipping out to all the foreign countries and some of your information is in there. He said, taking out a bingo book and throwing it to the young boy. You're on page 53 and 54, right between Itachi and Kakashi. Naruto turned to the page and looked at what was on it. Name: Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha Naruto aka Shi no Kage, Shadow of Death. Age: 9. Eye color: blue-gray. Hair color: blonde. Rank: Anbu Captain, Kitsune Mask. Affinities: wind, water, earth, are primary with fire and lightning, being secondary. Trained by the Sandaime of Konoha, Green Beast of Konoha, and the Genjutsu Mistress of Konoha. Mother: Uzumaki Kushina aka no Shi, Red Death. Father: Namikaze Minato aka Kiroi no Senku, Yellow Flash. Class: SS Class. Skills: in all categories, very high ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu. Bloodline: Sharingan. High chakra reserves and container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. This condition has issued the village to add another S to the class. Naruto looked at the Hokage like he was crazy, his Sharingan spinning like crazy. Why the hell did you put all of this in here? He yelled, wanting an answer immediately. The Hokage looked sternly at the young boy. Don't forget just who you're talking about, Naruto. I did what I did for the village. Now we are much stronger and more feared with you, public. He said, calming down at the end. Not to mention, you were only put into Anbu for protection until you got strong enough to protect yourself, which you can do fine. Now leave my office, I got work to do. He said, dismissing Naruto with a wave of his hand, which Naruto had nothing to do except apologize to his leader. While bowing, and leaving the office, in a body flicker. Not even a second after appearing from his body flicker to the roof of a nearby building did he hear the voice again. "You're just going to take that from that old fossil?" the voice asked in mild discontent. Deep down Naruto knew this was the Kyuubi, and decided to be respectful to the giant kitsune in his mind. After all, it is the king of all demons speaking to him. I have to, he's the leader of the village. Naruto thought simply. And yet, you're stronger than him, he did too good of a job training you. And plus I have the feeling that something is going to happen in the future, and when the time comes, you need to make a decision, to either stay here, where you're hated in public and respected in the shadows, or leave and you'll be feared by all. Think about the choice, Kit. The Kyuubi said cryptically as it returned to the depths of Naruto's mind. Naruto stood on the roof for another 5 minutes just thinking about what the Kyuubi said. Before he shook his head and jumped towards Anko's apartment, to see how she was doing, as he haven't seen her in quite some time. He appeared in front of the door and knew not to knock as it was a little too early in the morning and she will get cranky if he woke her up. So he picked the lock, as melting it would be bad, and silently entered the apartment and looked around. The apartment was a little boring, if you asked him. It only contained a couch and little table, and a television, no pictures on the wall and no decorations anywhere. He heard light snoring coming from the single bedroom and quietly entered and seen one of the purple-haired goddesses in the village, sprawled out in her bed, the blankets barely covering her body. Her hair was out of its usual ponytail and it was longer than he had imagined. It looked like it could reach her shoulder blades. He looked around her room and seen a couple of picture frames with pics of her, Yugo, Kurenai, and another girl he hasn't seen before. She looked about 16 years old. She had brown hair, and big red fang-like marks on her cheeks, showing that she was an Inuzuka. She had a moderate-sized bust, maybe a small C-cup, and nice cute light brown eyes. This picture was taken recently. He noticed Anko and the others looked the same as they do now, so maybe a couple of weeks ago. The main thought in his mind was, why wasn't he invited to take the picture with them, or was this girls' night out? Whatever it was, he didn't care. All he cared about was meeting this new chick. The real thought was, why didn't he know this girl? He was an Anbu dam and he should know about everyone in the village, until it came to him. He snapped his fingers, and silently watched Anko turn over and make a cute sound as she did. But back at the topic at hand, the girl was Inuzuka Hana, daughter of the clan head, Sum. Ah, I love being an Anbu, he thought as he turned around. He walked to the door and exited the room, closing the door silently as he did, for what he was about to do would most likely wake her up. A little after 8 a.m., Anko finally woke up and opened her door. When the scent of some delicious breakfast invaded her senses, she got into shinobi mode, knowing that, not only did she not have a roommate but someone was still in her apartment. She grabbed a kunai from only Kami knows where and stalked through her house, and entered the kitchen throwing her kunai as she did. She didn't expect for it to bounce off of a swirling ball of wind that was surrounding the intruder, and the only people she knew that knew how to use wind was Naruto and Asuma, and the latter was still at the capital. She barely just noticed that the intruder was Naruto. She rubbed the sleepiness out of her eyes, and looked closer at the invader, and seen his spiky blonde hair. Now Anko-chan, that is no way to treat someone who just cooked us breakfast. Naruto said, hopping down from nothing. She scoffed. Yeah, well, Gaki, nobody told you to cook this delicious smelling meal. She speaking slower as she smelled the food on her kitchen table. Her stomach growled and she blushed slightly, as she rubbed the back of her head. Sorry, I haven't had anything to eat since you brought in that missing nin, Zabuza. He hasn't even talked since we got him. Not even Ibiki can make him utter a single sound. I even told him I was going to cut his balls off if he didn't say anything, she said, not seeing Naruto shiver in slight fear. He sat at the table with the rest of the food, and did he talk? Naruto said, dividing the food up equally, and sitting down. He just cooked an omelet, that had some ham, and herbs in there, with a side of hash browns and bacon. She nodded, after saying, itadakimasu, with Naruto. Yeah, he said, don't cut my balls off, and that he needed them, she said as they both laughed. Now that I think about how exactly did you capture someone like Zabuza in the first place? She said, taking a bite of her omelet. Naruto stopped mid-bite. I never even asked Kuma how he did it, he thought as he looked at Anko and shrugged his shoulders. Maybe we should ask him, later. Naruto suggested after finishing his meal, and Anko agreed as she too finished her meal. That was a great breakfast, thank you Naruto-kun. Anko said, giving him a peck on the cheek, watching Naruto blush and rub the back of his head in embarrassment. So how about we go to HQ now and get the questioning over with? She asked, walking to her room, to change into her regular clothes since all she was wearing was a pair of bra and panties over a robe. That's good, Naruto said, and as soon as the door to her room closed, blood started to finally come out of his nose and his head collapsed on the table, as he had seen more than he should have, and used the Sharingan to memorize it, good thing she hadn't noticed. She came out minutes later after he picked his head up from the table and cleaned up the blood from his nose, and they left for the Anbu HQ. On the way, Naruto turned to Anko. Hey Anko, did you get the new bingo book? He asked out of the blue. She shook her head negative. No, why did it update? She asked with Naruto nodded, and reaching into his pocket and throwing the one he got from the Hokage. She caught it mid-jump, and skimmed through it. She stopped completely, forcing Naruto to stop too. Naruto-kun, what are you doing in the bingo book, and why is there so much information? You know, now that I think about it, all of the people that enter the Anbu and have the Sharingan find their way onto the bingo book, it's weird, she said, shrugging her shoulders, not caring anymore, for what was done, was done. Meaning it couldn't be reversed, so you might as well adapt to it. Naruto caught the book and they continued their journey. The Hokage put me in here, saying that, now that I'm stronger I should get out of the shadows, and stop hiding. Which I understand, but I've been in the shadow for the past 4 or 5 years now. I like not being glared at by the populace every time I'm on break and journey into the village. Naruto said, just rambling the more he went on. Anko turned to him and said, what did you say? I wasn't listening. She said, laughing, knowing that he knew where she got it from. Naruto joined in the laughter as they did a quick body flicker to appeared on the other side of the wall and went straight to Anbu HQ. They entered after being checked and saying hello to some of the members they knew and headed for the part of the building that held the prisoners, where they went through the maze-like corridor and opened a door and stepped into a hallway that held the holding cells. They passed by many dangerous criminals that were either there for life or waiting for a private execution. They opened the door on the end of the hallway and entered a less dangerous criminal area. These were just people that were only here for a predetermined amount of time, and those either getting ready for being interrogated or was sent back here because they didn't crack. They walked to the guard guarding the cell and asked him if they could talk to the prisoner. The Anbu nodded and walked away, after unlocking the door for them to enter. And enter they did. It was safe as Zabuza's hands were tied to the wall, and the handcuffs had a chakra draining seal etched onto them, and not to mention the strength of the cuffs themselves, so they wouldn't be in any kind of trouble. Currently Zabuza was meditating with his hands behind his back and sitting in the most comfortable position he could be in. Zabuza, we need to talk to you, Naruto said, sitting down in front of the demon of the mist. Naruto began to study the man since he didn't respond to his statement. He noticed the man was in a very deep concentration. I noticed you seem to be reinforcing your mind, to prepare yourself for when Inoichi-san comes to take a look at your mind, to gather information about your country and anything else he feels like looking at. Naruto said, seeing a slight twitch in the left eye of the man. He had been removed of his weapons, obviously, and his original clothing. He was now wearing a simple gray full-body jumpsuit, and simple cloth wrapped around his feet. And now that Naruto thought about it, he had come in with somebody. Say, where is that one kid we brought in with him? Naruto asked Anko, not turning away from the man, and he was guaranteed a more noticeable twitch from the man, who then opened his eyes. Where is Haku? He asked simply with fire burning in his brown eyes, looking straight into Naruto's own blue-gray ones. Naruto wagged his finger in front of the man's face. I'm the one that's going to answer the questions, but if it'll help you cooperate then I'll tell you, are you going to cooperate with me? Naruto asked, stopping his finger wagging and looking straight into the older man's eyes, just as he was doing to him. He could have used the Sharingan to make him cooperate, but where was the fun in that? They continued to stare into each other's eyes before Zabuza lowered his eye level and nodded to the boy, hating that he had to do it, but he just had to know where the boy was. Naruto gave a small smile, and spoke to Anko. Anko, tell the man where the boy is, I imagine that he'll be pleased, he said, standing up from his crouch and shook his legs to get rid of the aches and pains. Anko also smiled. The kid is in a way better, more furnished jail cell. We felt that since he was only a kid, he should be put into a more livable area. You're lucky that Naruto-kun here discourages using pain to get information, or I might just have chopped your balls off, she said, laughing at the end, making the two males in the room shiver at the statement. Naruto pushed the thought out of his mind and crouched back in front of Zabuza. Now let's get this started with, first question, how exactly did Kuma capture you yesterday? Naruto said with curiosity in his voice. Zabuza got a little annoyed at hearing the question. Well, at first, I walked away from Gato, and felt the slight use of a body flickered, and immediately knew someone was shadowing me in my charge. I was then trying to lead the follower into an open area where I could properly deal with it, but I felt another pulse of chakra, and the man appeared in front of me with Haku under his arms, and threatened that I come with him, or else he'll kill Haku. When Naruto heard that, he grew angry with the muscled man. At the tactic he used, it sounded a little like how root ninjas would perform, and if the man was on his team, he must have been ordered to watch either him, Itachi, or both of them, by their leader Danzo. He didn't have time to tell the man to continue, as he did a second later, after hearing that I struggled for a solution on what to do, until I gave myself up, as the Anbu did have a kunai on Haku's neck. After giving up, I watched him put his kunai away, and lunged for Haku, but an earth clone appeared from under me, grabbing my foot before I could fully get off the ground. I tripped and fell on the floor and was then knocked out with a chop to my neck, and next thing I know I'm waking up here. Zabuza said, finishing his story, reluctant to tell them that he fell on the floor. Naruto heard laughter in his head, and knew that the Kyuubi was rolling on the floor laughing loudly because his head was starting to hurt. Shut up, please, I can't concentrate. Naruto thought, adding the please when it suddenly got quiet. A chuckle was then heard after. It was wise of you to say please, Ninjin. Naruto shook his head, and turned to Anko. Go get Ibiki and get him to handle the rest of the interrogation. I'm going to gather my team for some team sparring. You want to watch? He asked as they walked out of the cell. The Anbu near them saluted and locked the door and stood in front of it again. Anko nodded and they went separate ways to gather the team, with Naruto telling Anko to meet them at Training Ground 43. Since Naruto was already in HQ, he searched for Kuma, and found him in the ANBU's personal training ground. Kuma, gather your equipment and meet me at Training Ground 43. He said, simply, not seeing Kuma nod as he turned around and body flickered out of HQ. Knowing that Anko was getting Yugo, he went back into the Uchiha compound, and checked the sun for a quick time estimate. It looked around noon. He looked around and noticed people looking at him, and wishing him a good afternoon. He noticed something though, not many people were in the streets, only kids and some old people. He shrugged his shoulders, thinking it wasn't his problem, and body flickered to the main house, where he lived. He entered just as Fugaku was leaving and they ran into each other with him falling on his butt. Ow! The blonde said, rubbing his butt. The older man slightly glared down at him and fixed his formal kimono. The glare became more cold at noticing Naruto's blonde hair. Get up, boy, you're in my way, he said as Naruto picked himself up and stepped out of the man's way, his Sharingan activated as he glared at the man's back. He entered the house to see Itachi's back as he walked down the hallway to his room. He could feel the anger rolling off of his body, so he followed. He peeked his head in Itachi's room. Itachi, What happened with your father, back there? Naruto asked, not wanting to be in the dark. Itachi looked at his captain. Well, after breakfast, he talked to me in private, telling me that the clan was going to have a meeting, and I told him that I didn't want to go. I thought that it ended right there, but after Mother and Sasuke left to get some more groceries, he talked to me again, telling me the plan he was thinking of. He's planning to take the village over and assume his place as the Hokage. I strongly disagreed with him and told him that he'll only get himself killed. He then explained to me that it wouldn't happen if I was to become a spy and give up the weaknesses of the Hokage Tower and the Sandame's living quarters to assassinate the Hokage. Itachi said in anger as he began dressing in his Anbu armor, as he wanted to get a mission to calm down. Naruto shook his head and stared at the roof, and I expect that you declined that offer as well. Naruto said, looking briefly at Itachi, seeing him nod his head. So what are you going to do? Naruto asked his subordinate. I'm going to report it to the Hokage and follow whatever order he gives me, he said, strapping on his boots and standing up, and after opening his window jumped out, with Naruto following. Naruto turned to the older Uchiha. Itachi, do that later. Now we're going to training ground 43 for an exercise I have brewing up in my noggin. Naruto said as he jumped off course to where he knew training ground 43 was. Itachi stopped on the next roof and stared at the Hokage Tower in the distance and glanced behind him and looked at the retreating form of Naruto. He sighed as he turned around and followed his captain. Naruto was leaning against a giant boulder, with his hands behind his head, by the time Itachi jumped into the clearing. It was minutes after him that Yugo and Anko appeared, and then it was Kuma who appeared. Kuma wasn't wearing his mask and it showed a man's face. He had a mustache and beard combo, making a goatee. He had dull, emotionless brown eyes that were common in Root, and short brown hair. They gathered to him and waited for what he had to say. Naruto continued looking at the sky as he spoke. As you all most likely know, my identity in Anbu has been recently exposed by the Hokage, and after some time thinking about it, I came to understand why he did it. Naruto began his speech as his team and Anko listened on quietly. Naruto shoved himself off the rock and looked around. I now believe that he is making the village more feared than what is used to be before the unveiling. Anko has already seen my page in the bingo book. Now I am to believe that you have seen it by now? He asked, looking at his team, watching them nod their heads. I seen it when Anko came to my apartment. Yugo said, crossing her arms. Naruto nodded his head. Good, now today I have a little exercise plan for the evening. It's going to be a 2-on-2 fight, with the team switching up every now and again. That part will be played by Anko, who will call out 2 numbers of whoever she wants on a team. Naruto said, handing out some numbered papers. The rules are simple, no weapons, and only taijutsu. Naruto had 1, Yugo had 2, Itachi 3, and Kuma 4. After everyone had their numbers and stepped away from each other, Anko called out 2 numbers, 1 and 2. She said loudly as Naruto and Yugo dashed towards Itachi and Kuma. They split apart and rushed after their separate targets. Naruto reached Kuma and sent a punch at his chest. Kuma quickly sidestepped it and grabbed the arm and threw Naruto into the air. While in the air, Naruto threw down a smoke pellet that exploded outwards and a heavy smoke covered the area. He landed just in time to see Kuma jump out of the heavy fog and try to kick him in the side. Without using the Sharingan, he predicted that this would happen and was already in the motion for a jump. As the leg passed under him, he used it as leverage as he sent a kick of his own at Kuma. The kick connected as Kuma was sent flying backwards. With Yugo, she sent a punch at Itachi, who dropped to the ground to dodge it, and went for a leg sweep. The purple-haired woman slightly jumped over it and sent a kick at Itachi as she did it. Itachi barely tilted his head back enough for the kick to safely pass his head. While in the motion of going backward, he rolled and sprung in the air and landed on his feet, just in time to grab the punch thrown by Yugo. He then threw her over his shoulders, and she was sent flying in the air. Anko then called out, 2 and 3. So Yugo, while in the air, turned around and when she landed on the floor sent a punch at Naruto, who had just kicked Kuma away. Naruto's danger senses went off and jumped away from the punch. "Nice dodge, Naruto-kun," she said as she ran to Naruto. Naruto nodded, and dodged another punch and a kick before he sent his own. It missed the middle of her midsection, but connected with the side of it. Yugo used the spin the punch caused and roundhouse kicked Naruto in the side of his shoulders. Naruto was sent skidding on his feet for a couple of feet, before he stopped and rushed toward the Anbu female. With Itachi, after throwing Yugo he heard the numbers being called and rushed to the flying Kuma. While Kuma was rolling on the ground he jumped in the air and sent an axe kick at the brown-haired man. Kuma stopped himself from rolling, just in time to put up his arms to block Itachi's axe kick. He didn't push him off like some people would. Instead he quickly grabbed the ankle of the eldest Uchiha and slammed him to the floor beside him. He then got up and threw him across the field. Itachi groaned after being slammed into the ground and while in the air, he activated his Sharingan. So when Kuma came after him it was a piece of cake to counter and dodge his attacks. He sent a couple of his own, and soon Kuma was gasping for air, after getting hit in the throat, but he didn't have time to even do that as Itachi spun and sent a roundhouse kick to the man's head, sending him across the field. After the kick connected, Anko called out, 1 and 2, again, making Itachi curse under his breath after kicking the man. And with Naruto and Yugo, he skidded to a stop right in front of her, after faintly hearing the numbers. He had almost crashed into the purple-haired Anbu, but she moved out of the way and grabbed his arm, stopping him from going any further. They then dashed toward the others. This time Naruto went after Itachi, and activated his Sharingan, seeing Itachi's own red eyes. This was something you would want to see as none of the hits these two warriors were throwing hit their designated target. Then something intriguing happened. Naruto connected a hit on the elder Uchiha. Itachi flew back and groaned a little as he rubbed his sore cheek. "How'd you do that?" he asked, getting up and noticing Naruto didn't have his Sharingan activated. And even though he was moving, Itachi couldn't predict where he was going to be next. Naruto smirked as he could obviously hear the curiousness in Itachi's calm voice. "It's a technique I created to counter the predicting abilities of the Sharingan. I'm not going in detail, but basically I halted my chakra from going where I was going to go next. I know it's a little difficult to understand, but don't you think I wouldn't know the weakness of my own bloodline?" he said, seeing the small indentation of a raised eyebrow from the dark-haired Uchiha. He smirked again as he spoke again. "All right, let's bring out the ninjutsu," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Now it's going to be everyone for themselves," he said as his hands blurred through hand seals, shocking Itachi at its speed. "Sweden. Ya no Kuchi, serpent mouth," he said as he spit out a snake from his mouth and it sped towards Itachi, weaving through the air as it did. Itachi wasn't being idle as he was also doing hand seals. He said, "Doden, Doryu Heki, earth wall." He crouched to the ground and slammed his hands on the ground and a wall of earth rose in the air, stopping the serpent from doing any damage to him. And then the battle of elements started with the two Uchiha experts. With Yugo she dashed forward, but her punch was blocked by the recovering Kuma. She was then raised in the air, but before the man could slam her back on the floor, she kicked him under his chin. As he let go of her she dropped onto the floor and spun on her hand, using her feet to kick his feet from under him. The man became a little agitated at always being put on the floor and quickly rolling back onto his feet and kicked Yugo in the stomach while she was getting up. Yugo was a little surprised at the speed Kuma was going, and she was, again, surprised when he appeared by her and punched her to the ground. The short, 2 feet, fall did more damage she would have thought. And then he threw another punch at her. She rolled out of the way, just in time to dodge the heavy punch. They both then heard Naruto tell them they could now use ninjutsu in the fight. So while she was getting up she was doing hand seals. "Raiden. Inazuma Ken, lightning fist," she said as she dashed towards the brown-haired man with lightning around her fist. Kuma was doing some hand seals also, but the speed Yugo was going surprised him a little, and he didn't have time to finish them unless he didn't want to have a head anymore. He ducked backwards and only received a slight shock from the passing lightning. He quickly jumped away from the female and did a hand seal. Doden, Doryu Taiga, Earth Flow River, he said as the dashing Yugo slipped on the mud and was being carried by the strong current of the mud. In the trees, away from the fighting was Anko. She was a little excited with the fighting, but got bored when her job no longer existed. But getting an idea, she dropped to the ground from her branch and did some hand seals. Doden, Iwa hubby, rocky snakes, she said as dozens of snakes crashed out of the ground and slithered toward the others. She grinned as she joined in the fight. Naruto just dodged a fireball from his fellow Uchiha and was about to send one of his own when half a dozen snakes appeared in front of him and tried to bite him. So instead of the fireball going to Itachi, it hit the face of the nearest snake, so the resulting explosion sent him flying away, with a couple burns marring his shorts. He looked around and dodged the bite from another snake. He growled as lightning covered his body, before it covered his hands and feet. So the nearest snake was kicked and the exploding shrapnel damaged another snake as his enhanced speed allowed him to dodge it. Soon the remaining 4 snakes were destroyed, but a new challenger emerged as Anko appeared in front of him. I see you destroyed my pets, now I want an apology, she said, crossing her arms with a smirk on her face. Naruto lightly gaped at her. You're serious? He said in disbelief, and after seeing her nod her head he shook his. I'm sorry, I can't do that. You ruined my training exercise, he said, dashing forward as he fought his new opponent. With Itachi, after firing his fireball at Naruto, and seeing him dodge it, a half a dozen snakes appeared around him. And one of them coiled itself around his body, but the body then exploded, destroy that snake and 2 of the other snakes around it. He appeared again, and with only 3 more snake to fight he did some hand seals. Kaden, Ryu Atama N, flaming dragon head, he said as a large dragon head flew out of his mouth and quickly destroyed a snake. And as the remaining 2 slithered to him he some more hand seals. Kaden, Zukoku, head mincing pain, he said as he blew out a huge column of fire, that destroyed the other 2 snakes when it exploded after contact with them. He looked around and spotted Naruto fighting Anko, so he decided to fight with Yugo and Kuma. After Yugo dodged a huge dango of earth, she launched a beam of lighting at the unsuspecting snake that appeared in front of her. Though the beam kept going and hit Kuma in the leg, after he destroyed his own snake. He was lucky that it only brushed against the side of it and not through it, or he wouldn't be able to use the leg for a long time. He winced as the beam passed by. He then started doing some hand seals when his 5 remaining snakes surrounded him. Doden, Ishi no Yoroi, stone armor, he said as his body was then covered in hardened rocks that were surrounding him. He punched the nearest rock and destroyed it easily with his enhanced strength. Yugo appeared behind him and kicked the snake that was about to make him its next meal. Watch yourself, Cairo, these snakes mean business, she said, firing another beam at another snake. The newly named Cairo nodded his head and did a hand seal. Doden, Ishi Kasui, stone spikes, he said, and destroyed 3 of the remaining 4 snakes. He then dashed forward and punched the last snake in its rocky head, destroying it. He turned around to see Yugo destroy her last snake with another one of her lightning beams. It was then that Itachi appeared near them. Anko is fighting Naruto. Tiako, let's go watch, he said as they all disappeared and went to watch the fight between Naruto and Anko. Naruto dodged another high-speed strike from the purple-haired goddess. Snakes burst from her sleeve and gathered around him, trying to constrict around his body, but his body went poof in a cloud of smoke. Naruto didn't want to use any dangerous jutsus, so he did a hand seal. Sweden, Mizoripa, violent water wave, he said as he blew out a stream of water. He cursed himself when he seen Anko jump over it, and send more snakes at him. He charged a Rasengan in his hand and destroyed the attacking snakes. He did more hand seals when Anko landed and slammed his hands on the ground. Doden, Otoshi Buddha, covering lid, he said as an oversized lid fell on Anko and covered her. This gave Naruto time to take a deep breath before Anko tried to pull him into the ground with her headhunter technique. Thankfully he jumped away in time. He ended his jutsu and watched the giant lid disappear in a puff of smoke. He decided to end the little spar they were having as he vanished from his spot, making Anko frown. Naruto appeared behind her. "Don't frown," he whispered in her ear, as he pressed a pressure point in her neck, making her body fall into his arms. He didn't have time to take a breath before the body in his arms disappeared, showing a piece of wood in its place. He groaned when he seen this, and looked at the smirking Anko from across the clearing. "All right, she wants to play like that, then let's play," he muttered as he quickly did some hand signs. "Kaden, Yoan no Ukami, wolves of burning embers," he muttered as he blew out a dozen of little fireballs at the ground in front of him. And like the name suggests, wolves made of fire emerged from the embers. There was 10 wolves in total. Anko smirked and brought back her rocky snakes, and when the two hordes of creatures met in the middle, a massive explosion rocked the clearing, and a crater of a couple of meters wide and a half a meter deep was left in the middle. The others' eyes widened as, not only haven't they seen this jutsu, but they were surprised at the magnitude of the explosion. The fight had ended as soon as Anko witnessed the crater, as she whistled to show her surprise of the jutsu. "Geez, Naruto-kun, what if that would have hurt me? Now I really want my apology," she said, walking over to him, as the others joined in. Naruto's response was cut off when he seen a hawk diving down towards him. It flapped its wings and landed on his outstretched arm. Naruto took the scroll from around its leg, and the hawk squawked loudly, making Naruto's ears hurt because of the proximity of the sound. Itachi unsealed a small piece of jerky from his scroll and gave it to the bird, and they all watched it fly away, its mission now complete. "What does the scroll say, Naruto-kun?" Anko asked, looking at the Hokage's seal on the scroll. Naruto opened the scroll, looked it over and burned it when he was finished. "So are you going to tell us or not?" Anko said with her hands on her hips. "The council just wants to see me about the bingo book and my position in Anbu," he said as he began to walk away. He soon vanished in a tornado body flicker. It was only a matter of time before the council called Taicho in. Kairo said as he rubbed his head. Itachi showed a slight frown when he heard the comment, because now his little brother was going to be in a room with a bunch of power-hungry old people, that will most likely try to control him in some way. He shook his head and looked at the sun in the sky to check the time. Well, according to the sun it was around 3 in the afternoon. He sighed because around this time his other brother, Sasuke, would come home from school and ask for training. The kid just turned 8 a couple of weeks ago, and since then he has been asking for training non-stop. It was getting on his nerves. "You alright, Itachi?" Yugo said as they all glanced at him. He just shook his head and started walk home. Yugo shrugged her shoulders and went home to take another shower. Kuma went to go train by himself until his team gets a mission, and the only person left was Anko, who started walking to the mission hall to see if she could get a mission, but on her way she cursed herself as she realized that Naruto didn't apologize to her. With Naruto walked into the room and stood on the right side of the Hokage. "Now that Naruto-kun is here, this meeting can begin," the Sandaime said. Naruto looked around the room as everyone looked at him and muttered words to their neighbors. He yawned to show how he felt about the meeting so far. One of the elders stood. It was the woman. "Hokage-sama, can you tell us, why weren't we informed about Uzumaki's position in the Anbu, nor of his skills, until this morning?" Koharu asked, starting off the questioning. Before the Hokage could answer, Naruto did. "I don't think that's any of your business, as the Anbu core members are supposed to be kept secret and only exposed when the village needs a morale boost. If my identity was revealed at an earlier time, then it wouldn't have worked as good as it did at the present time. And plus the council, not even the shinobi side, needs to know the roster for the Anbu core. Trust me, I'm very updated in the rules of the village," he explained, picking at his ears, when the noise started escalating. "You insolent whelp, it would be wise not to anger the council, as we have more power than you can imagine," Danzo said, another elder of the village, as he too stood to his feet. A louder voice made itself known. "Yeah, you brat, you're lucky we don't have you hanged for your disrespect," Sakumi said in disgust at the demon Uchiha. still not believing that he was the son of the Yondaime. Naruto slightly glared at the women, before relaxing. If I am correct to believe, but isn't this a matter dealing with a shinobi of the village? You have no business in here, civilian. I would like to have you leave, with the rest of the civilian council. He said, looking at the Hokage, who nodded, and Anbu escorted the civilians out of the room, albeit they were yelling their heads off at the demon kicking them out of the room. The shinobi council smirked at the backs of the civilians as the elders frowned at seeing their support leave the room, because with them gone they couldn't accomplish anything. Damn that little brat and his knowledge of the village's rules and regulations. Fugaku spoke up. Uzumaki, how long have you been in the Anbu? He said, looking into Naruto's eyes with his Sharingan activated to see if the child was lying. Everyone's eyes were on the child, who glanced at the Hokage for a second, seeing him nod his head. I've been in the Anbu since I was 6 years old, so almost 4 years, he said, answering truthfully, not seeing any reason to lie to them. Fugaku nodded his head, having a feeling he would say that. Inoichi spoke up. How are you doing mentally? Are you suffering from any mental traumas or anything? He asked, knowing how dangerous the Anbu core was to a person's mind. Naruto shook his head in the negative. No, nothing is wrong with my mind, he said, with his head leaning on his hand in boredom. The meeting progressed for another hour with useless questions being asked to the blonde. Ironically, the elders kept quiet and let the others ask the questions. After it ended, Naruto walked out of the room, with Fugaku by his side as they both walked to the Uchiha compound. Fugaku looked at the bored Anbu captain and got a plan. Hey Naruto, you like power, right? He said, looking at the young Uchiha. Naruto mentally shook his head, already knowing what he wanted to ask him, but decided to play along anyway. Yeah, I do. Why do you have any? He asked, looking at the clan head. Fugaku ignored the jab at his strength. Yes, I do, and you could have some if you help me, but I'll only tell you if you help me. Do we have a deal? The clan head said, keeping things as vague as he could. As long as I get stronger, I don't care what I have to do, Naruto said with faked enthusiasm. Fugaku gave a dark smirk as he put his hand on Naruto's shoulder. With Naruto on my side, I'll become Hokage in no time, he thought sinisterly as they entered the compound. A year and a couple of months later. Naruto is now 11 years old, and he's walking to Itachi's room. It's around 2 o'clock in the morning and the rest of the household were sleeping. He's not going to Itachi's room because of an Anbu mission. No, their team has a week off. It's about what he talked about with Fugaku a couple of hours back with the ninja of the Uchiha clan. He silently opens the door, and peeks his head into the room. He silently walked to Itachi's bed and stood over him. Itachi, he whispered, and the eldest Uchiha's eyes shot open at hearing his name. His dark eyes bled to his Sharingan and then to his Mangekyou Sharingan he gained after Shisui was sent to spy on him and he was forced to kill him. The first time he awakened it, he went straight to Naruto, who he thought already had it, but it was news to Naruto, as he had never heard about it until that point in time. This forced Naruto to meditate and confront the Kyuubi about the subject, and all the giant fox did was laugh in his face. He still remembers that day. Flashback 4 months ago. Why are you laughing? All I asked was, what the Mangekyou Sharingan was. Naruto asked in annoyance at the kitsune's response toward his question. The noise the fox was making his ears hurt, and it just continued until Naruto used his power over his own mind to make the cage much smaller than it was supposed to be, stopping the fox's laughter and making it a little uncomfortable. Alright Ninjin, I'll tell you, just make the cage bigger or I'll eat you alive, the fox half pleaded and half threatened. Naruto thought for a moment and then made the cage larger since the fox still hasn't told him what he wants to know. Alright fox, now can you answer my question, please? The blonde said, sitting on the damp floor. Kyuubi shook a little, getting feeling back into his body, and let his tails move across the floor behind him, finding a comfortable spot for them, and then he laid down and glared the sitting human. Don't ever do that again. Now the Mangekyou Sharingan is an upgrade of the regular Sharingan. The user gains special abilities after activating these special eyes, a way to get the Mangekyou is to train your eyes beyond normal limits, and even more beyond than that. Another way is to kill your best friend, in which the depression felt for committing such an act will somehow transform your eyes. I still don't understand that part, and I still don't. Are you following me? Kyuubi said, getting out of his lecture mode when he looked at the blonde Anbu, seeing him staring at the ceiling above him. Naruto looked at the Kyuubi for a brief second before looking back at the ceiling. Yeah, I was listening, I was just thinking about something. Naruto said, asking for the Kyuubi to continue with his lecture. The giant kitsune growled at the lack of attention but let it slide since he knew that the boy was truly paying attention. Alright, the abilities of the eyes are unique to only the eyes. In the left eye of the Mangekyou is the most unique genjutsu known to you humans. It's the Tsukiyomi, or goddess of the moon. When using this technique, the caster can put the victim in a genjutsu that is both mentally and physically harmful, and they will be in the illusion for a minimum of 24 hours or a maximum of 72 hours. In the world of Tsukiyomi, you are kami and can torture your victim in any way you can imagine, so it kind of helps to have a vivid imagination. The kitsune said, chuckling at the things he would be doing on mostly everyone he does the technique on. Now the right eye of the Mangekyou are the most dangerous flames in the all realms, Amaterasu, or goddess of the sun. When using this ninjutsu, you can burn anything and everything you literally set your eyes on. These flames can never be extinguished by water techniques and will keep burning for 7 days and 7 nights. The only weakness of the Amaterasu is that the flames can be sealed if the sealer knew how. But without the sealing, the flames will continue to burn unless either you stop them or after 7 days and nights passes, so you can literally burn a village down, and they won't be able to stop it. Kyuubi lectured, his tails waving behind him as if in a trance, and his eyes were glazed over thinking about burning the village down and sleeping in its ashes. Now when using both of the eyes of the Mangekyou, you summon the most powerful defense of all time, the Susanoo, or the god of sea and storms. This defense can even become your offense, but the sort of offense is different with every user, and only Uchiha Madara, Uchiha Izuna, and now Uchiha Itachi have ever activated the Mangekyou, and I haven't seen their Susanoo. The fox continued to lecture, bearing now mind to Naruto, who continued to think on his newfound knowledge. Naruto looked at the Kyuubi. So is that it about the Mangekyou? He said, scratching his head, and began to stand up. No, it isn't all. Matter of fact, I've only just begun. The Kyuubi said, smirking as Naruto sat back on the floor. The Kyuubi then told him about another technique called Kamui, that can send somebody to another dimension and can even send you to another dimension. The technique can allow jutsu and even people to pass through them, but it had a weakness, and if you studied the workings of the technique for a long time, then you will find the weakness. Another technique was one that was banned by the Uchiha, and that was Izanagi. It's a genjutsu that grants the user the abilities to make wounds and disadvantages into nothing but a dream. This has a very, very, very dangerous after effect though, and that was the cost of your sight of the eye you used to cast it, and that was why it was banned. You don't exactly need the Mangekyou to use it. Now that is all about the Mangekyou. Now remember, when one activates the Mangekyou, their sight will begin to fade, and a disease will spread through the body every time the person uses it. When you learn to activate yours, that will not be a problem, since I completely terminated that part of the eye's DNA strand, he said, looking at the slightly shocked Naruto. So every time Itachi uses one of those techniques, his eyesight will get worse and he'll eventually die or lose his sight when he uses his Mangekyou? He asked, just to make sure. The Kyuubi nodded and nodded, asked another question, how will he be able to keep his eyesight and not get sick? He asked, seeing the fox show a menacing smirk on his face. In order for the boy to keep his sight, is to take the eyes of another Uchiha that has the Mangekyou, and he will gain the eternal Mangekyou Sharingan, which will purge the body of the disease, fix your sight, and you'll gain a longer lifespan, not eternal but maybe another 100 years or so, or maybe 50 years. He said that last part to himself, but Naruto still heard it and slightly sweat dropped. Naruto thanked the giant fox for the knowledge, and when he was leaving he felt his eyes burning, causing him to rub his eyes furiously, and when he looked at Itachi, it made the Uchiha's face to register a shocked look. Naruto had gained the Mangekyou Sharingan from the Kyuubi, who had unlocked it, seeing as Naruto now knew about it. End flashback. Naruto's own Mangekyou sprang to life and they stared at each other until Naruto started talking. Itachi, didn't I tell you to stop using those eyes? I haven't found a way to negate the effects of the disease, he said, crossing his arms at his brother. Itachi shook his head and cancelled his Mangekyou, as did Naruto, but kept his Sharingan activated. I keep asking you to see if the Kyuubi negate the effects, but you keep denying the request. Now what is it that you needed to talk to me about? He said, sitting up and pushing the covers off of him. Naruto's once playful face went blank in an instant, making Itachi's do the same. The coup is going to happen in a week's time. I just came here to tell you the news, he said, his face returning to regular as he twisted the ends of his muscle shirt. Itachi's face stayed blank as he processed the information, until his face slightly turned to an annoyed one. Wait a minute, you woke me up at 2 in the morning to tell me the clan's ninjas were going to attack. Get out, I'm going back to sleep, he said, grabbing his covers and turning over, trying to go back to the dreamland. Naruto looked embarrassed as he rubbed the back of his head. Well, I guess I could have told you some other time, but I had to tell you now. I could feel myself being followed whenever the sun is up and sometimes when the sun is down. I think Fugaku is having me watched constantly to make sure I don't tell the plans of the assault to the Hokage. I only decided to lose the tails now to come here, he said as his face went to a serious one, sensing movement outside. The eldest Uchiha groaned silently as he was also being watched sometimes, but it was only whenever Naruto was near. He thought it was because Naruto knew the plans, and he never went to any of the meetings, since he didn't like the idea of fighting the village and trying to take over. You still didn't tell me why. You couldn't tell me any other time, he said, looking at Naruto from over his shoulder, but he didn't see him. He shrugged and tried to go back to sleep. He then slightly said, about time the clone left. With Naruto. Naruto appeared outside of the Uchiha compound. He swept his hand through his hair, feeling the ninja tailing him go the other way thanks to his shadow clone dispelling. He looked around a little and started jumping towards the Hokage's office. Moving quickly and silently through the air was like second nature to him. He appeared outside the window and slipped himself in silently, not to disturb the still working Hokage, who was grumbling about extra work. Thank Kami, a distraction, the old man whispered to himself, as he looked at Naruto. So what can I do for you, Naruto-kun? I don't recall giving your team a mission or anything, so how come you're not asleep like everyone else in the village? He asked as Naruto sat in the chair across the old cage. I'm sorry for the intrusion, Hokage-ji, but earlier today I was in another meeting with the Uchiha about the attack on your person, and they discussed that they were going to attack at the end of the week, he said, bowing his head slightly in respect and stared at the serious face worn by his leader. So they are acting. Are all the Uchiha going to attack? The Hokage asked, wondering if all of them were going to attack at once or in waves. They're going to come at once, Hokage-sama. I mean, there are only 60 Uchihas total, 40 are civilians and the others are Chunins and Junins. They literally don't have the numbers to go in waves, to wear down defenders, he said as the Hokage nodded at the logic. Then you're going to have to kill them all before they could even begin the coup, a voice said as the door opened, showing a man on a cane, and walking into the room, making the two inside to wear a frown. Do you understand? Nip the problem in the bud before people's lives get in danger, the man said as he walked into the light, showing his bandages around his head and one of his eyes. Danzo, what are you doing here so late in the night, and disturbing this private meeting? The Hokage asked, glaring at the man, who continued looking at the shocked Naruto. What, you want me to kill the entire clan? That's inhuman. The civilians have nothing to do with the coup. To even think of me killing those civilians for no apparent reason is sickening for me, but as Anbu I have no problem doing what is needed for the village, he said, putting his head down. No, Naruto, you don't have to kill the civilians of the Uchiha clan, only the active ninjas need to die, preferably the strongest of the clan, and the rest will quit, seeing as the strongest Sharingan holders are not going to be here to help them, Sarutobi said. But if he doesn't kill the civilians, they're going to eventually grow up into ninjas and their parents will tell them how some of their relatives tried to take over the village but were killed by somebody in the night. You don't want that to happen to you, he said, glaring at the young Anbu. Naruto started getting a little annoyed by the attention. Fine, I'll kill those that need to be killed. I'll observe them more to see if any of the civilians are aware of the plans, and if they are, then they're added to the list. The ones not aware will be spared, he said, disappearing from the office in a burst of electricity. Some of the static shocked Danzo and Sarutobi, making some of their hairs stand up. You're a fool, Sarutobi. If some of them are spared, then a coup will be in the future of this village, the one-eyed man said, turning around and heading back to his HQ to prepare some plans of his own. The old man just glared at the retreating man's back and got back to his paperwork. No, Danzo, you're the fool. Killing uselessly is not something that you used to do. What happened to you? He thought to himself as he got back to work. 4 days later. It was around 4 o'clock and Naruto was staring at the traveling Uchiha walk through their own dirt road of their compound. He sat atop a building with no one paying any attention to him, and if someone did look up, they will wave and say good afternoon, or just nod at him, in which he will say hi back or nod back. According to his calculations, 10 of the civilians knew about the coup and they were either retired shinobi or as in the family of an active ninja. Most of them were old, so they wouldn't be a challenge when the time came to kill them. He looked at the sky in thought. He was thinking about how he will kill them before they decided to attack. He was brought out of his thought when an Uchiha Chunin appeared behind him, bowing because of his status as an Anbu. He rose a second later and started talking. Naruto-san, Fugaku-sama would like to see you, he said simply as he and Naruto disappeared and reappeared in front of the central meeting building in the center of the compound. Naruto entered and looked at all the ninja the Uchiha had waiting for the meeting to start. Fugaku looked at the young Anbu enter and smirked. Now that Naruto-kun is here, the meeting can begin. For the first order of business, I believe that we should push up the deadline for the coup, he said, looking at the Uchiha in front of him. Naruto's face didn't betray his surprise as he had a feeling something like this was going to happen. Don't ask him how, all he could tell you is that his gut predicted something like this happening. The coup will happen tomorrow morning when everyone is just waking up. They'll too surprised about the sudden attack to do anything in time, and by then it'll be too late, since my adoptive son Naruto-kun would have already killed the old man Sarutobi, and the Uchiha will be the leaders of this villager, he said as cheering rung through the room, as some even slapped the back of Naruto in encouragement. But before the sun falls from the sky, a problem will have to be dealt with. My son Itachi is not going to be part of the coup, and Naruto will be the one to either have him join us or kill him, to prevent him from stopping the coup, he said, looking at Naruto, whose face was set in shock at the idea of him fighting Itachi. He couldn't possibly fight his brother for real, to the death like Fugaku was insinuating he would do. Not after all they've been through, he wouldn't do it, no matter what the man said. Naruto was broken out of his musing when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked up and stared Fugaku in the eyes. His eyes were hard and cold as steel. He knew that he will have to kill his son and he had no remorse about it, but beneath that steely look he could tell that Fugaku was hoping that he would be able to sway Itachi to their side. Naruto continued to stare the man in the eye, who had activated his Sharingan for some reason, so he activated his own. Don't worry, Fugaku-sama, the mission will be done. By tomorrow morning you will either be fighting side by side with your side or later be going to his funeral, he said as his Sharingan spun quickly, and the rest of the Uchiha cheered at his very short speech. 5 hours later, Naruto stood atop the entrance arch of the Uchiha compound. Beside him stood Itachi. They were both dressed in their Anbu uniforms. Naruto had put on a bandana to hide his blonde hair. Naruto looked to his partner in crime. Let's not worry about the consequences now, let's just get this over with and do it quickly and quietly, he said quietly as Itachi nodded and they sped through the compound. They soon split up and killed the ones they needed to in their sleep. But sooner or enough a scream was heard and many woke up and walked outside their homes to find the problem, only to scream again as bodies were on the ground, covered in their blood. 10 minutes ago, in an unknown location, a man stood bathed in shadow. It looked like he was on top of something, because there were 5 people below him. They were bowed but dressed as Anbu, the only difference were their blank, white masks. Remember the warning, soldiers, I want each and every one of them killed, and if they interfere, kill Naruto and Itachi, something about them intrigues me. Bring back all the heads you can carry, he said as the 5 men disappeared to complete their mission. Back to real time, Naruto sped through the compound, slicing the backs and fronts of all those that stood in his way. He killed a couple of civilians that wasn't aware of the coup that was going to happen in the morning, but he paid it no mind. As an Anbu, he was used to killing those that weren't supposed to witness something that was not supposed to be witnessed, and massacring the Uchiha clan was not supposed to be witnessed. He jumped and threw some kunai and shuriken at other ninjas and civilians in the street. With Itachi, he was practically doing the same thing, staying on top of the buildings and just throwing kunai and shurikens at the people below, keeping up his speed as he went by. They soon met and were surrounded by 8 of the remaining active ninja of the Uchiha clan. They disappeared, shocking the Uchiha, and before they could signal the position or attackers of the compound, they were killed by kunai, shurikens, and their standard issue blades. Naruto and Itachi then felt various chakra signatures all around the compound, and they each heard more screams and looked at each other, before Naruto cursed, "Oh shit, no, that bastard didn't," he said, confusing Itachi as he sped off. Naruto appeared in front of a root Anbu and quickly sliced into the man, but only got the man's arm. The root didn't show that he was hurt and tried to punch Naruto with his other arm, but he was silenced by Naruto, who swung his sword and killed the man by cutting his head off, after dodging the punch. Itachi appeared by Naruto. "Is that a root ninja? What is he doing here?" he said, looking at the head of the ninja rolled off the roof and to the ground below. "I don't know, but I have a pretty good reason. Good thing too, because now I have the perfect excuse," he said, confusing Itachi again, as he sped off to take care of the rest of this little group of executioners. Naruto sped through the streets, looking at all the dead bodies in the streets. He sighed, thinking that all this could have been avoided if somebody didn't interfere with his mission. The sounds of screaming were getting shorter and shorter, meaning that most of the people have already been killed and now the assailants were just looking for the rest. Itachi appeared beside Naruto. "Naruto, we have to get to my father and take care of him," he said as Naruto nodded, and they began to run towards the main house. They appeared and witnessed Fugaku fighting with 3 members of Root. Mikoto was fighting with him, and they seen Naruto and Itachi. "Naruto-kun, Itachi-kun, where have you been? Help us fight these murderers," Mikoto said, kicking a Root member a couple of feet away to get some breathing room. Naruto shrugged and dashed towards an unsuspecting member and stabbed his sword in the man's back. He quickly pulled back and swung his sword and sliced the man's head off. Another Root member was about to throw a kunai at the panting Mikoto, but Itachi blocked the kunai and quickly blew out a stream of fire in the close range, caused a small explosion, and Itachi flew backwards and quickly righted himself in the air and landed on his feet. His face had some ash on it. Fugaku killed the other Root member and walked to his wife holding his bleeding side. "Honey, the bastard got my liver, cough cough, take care of the kids," he said, falling to the floor just in front of his wife, causing her to cry out and quickly go to his side in despair. Sasuke then ran out of the house, and seen all the dead bodies of the Root members and his father, who he ran to. "Tu-san, wake up, Tu-san," he said, shaking his father's body. He looked at Itachi and Naruto. "Ni-sans, you have to help Tu-san," he said, shedding tears as he continued to shake his father's body, hoping the man will wake up. Itachi walked up to his brother. "Ototo, it's useless, he's dead. The man he was fighting stabbed him in one of his, let's say, death spots," he said, wondering how to explain to his brother while keeping the graphic words out of the explanation. Naruto looked as the family hugged together and stared at the 3 Root members that was littering the floor around the house. "Hey, wasn't there 5 of these guys?" he said, putting up a hand and counting off the dead ones on his fingers. "Let's see, there was the first guy to die, and then these 3, so what happened to the other chakra signature I felt in the beginning?" he asked himself before he felt a short chakra spike behind Mikoto and Sasuke. Itachi felt it too and quickly grabbed both his mother and brother and jumped to the side, avoiding the spikes of earth that were quickly rising out of the earth. Damn, I almost got you, you slick bastard, the man said, walking out of the shadows. Naruto glared at the man, until he recognized the build and sound of the man's voice. Hey Kairo, what the hell are you doing in the Uchiha compound? He said before he could stop himself since he already knew. Never mind, don't answer that, I already know, which means you have to die. He said, gripping his sword handle and pulled it from the ground where he had it stabbed into, and dashed towards the man, who pulled his own sword out and they began to fight it out. Itachi, seeing his captain in trouble, got up to help but was stopped when Naruto spoke up. No Itachi, this is my fight, just protect your family for the time being. The blonde said, taking off his bandana and throwing it in front of Kairo, and watched it fly in the man's face. He acted quick and stabbed his sword into the man, who disappeared in a puddle of mud. Well, I didn't know Taicho could fight so dirty. The man said, and for the last time, Kairo isn't my real name, it's a name given to me by my master, I have no real name. He said, going through some hand signs. Doden, Jishin, earthquake, he said, slamming his hands on the ground causing the ground to shake. Naruto knew he was going to do this jutsu and went through his own hand seals. Raiden, Hakai no Boruto, bolts of destruction, Naruto said as he pointed his hands at the nameless man, and multiple bolts of lightning fired from his hands. The man ended his short jutsu seeing as bolts were being sent his way, and they were coming quick. The first 3 missed because of them being too far away and him moving out of the way. The last 7 hit a different part of his body. One in the left leg, another in the right leg, one in the stomach, another one in his left rib, one in his left shoulder, another one shocked his left arm, and the last one went into his groin. That bolt was on accident and it made Naruto shudder in terror. When he heard the man, who was still alive, scream in pain, it didn't matter how much training you went through to not show emotions, if you get hit in the nuts by anything you're going to scream and yell until the pain goes away. Naruto walked up to the electrified man and swept his hand through his hair. And pointed his finger at the man's head. It's a shame, you know, after all those missions together, who would have thought I would be the one to kill you? And just so you know, this is for Zabuza and Haku, who told me to punish you for using your cheap trick to capture them a long time ago. He said as electricity surged through his fingers and he thought, Raiden, Mitsuzo Shu, white lightning, he said as the lightning shot into the man's head and going through it into the ground. He turned around and looked at the others. Sasuke was amazed at the ninjutsu that was being used but was shocked and a little disgusted by the kill. Mikoto wore a smile of pride at the display of one of her children and Itachi smiled at the way his brother handled things. The fight would have been over way earlier if he would have helped, but he had the feeling that Naruto was just showing off to Sasuke, showing him that with enough training he would be able to do the same thing. Naruto looked at the 9-year-old Sasuke and gave him a thumbs up. It's okay now, Sasuke Ototo, the bad man won't hurt anybody anymore, he said, making Itachi sweat drop when he seen one of Naruto's tooth shine. Naruto created a dozen shadow clones. Okay, I want each of you to search the compound and bring the survivors here. If there are any. He thought, looking at the root member in front of him. 15 minutes later. There was 5 survivors out of 60 members of the Uchiha clan, Sasuke, Mikoto, and 3 other clan members. One was a boy the age of 7, the others were twins girls the age of 4, the new 3 were brother and sisters and the boy was protecting his sisters. The boy was named Daisuke, one of the girls was named Mai while the other was called Kai. Mai had a ponytail while Kai didn't. Another difference was that Mai was dressed in the color dark blue while Kai was dressed in the color dark gray. Daisuke was wearing gray shorts and a dark blue high-collared shirt. It was obvious that Mikoto was the only surviving adult of the Uchiha clan, and now had to take care of 3 more kids. You don't know how ecstatic she was about raising more children. She loved raising kids is what I'm trying to say. Mikoto hugged the children one more time and led them into the clan house. She looked at Naruto and Itachi who were watching Sasuke show the little kids around. Hey, now that I think of it, why are you two dressed in your Anbu armor so late into the night? She asked, looking at both of them curiously. Naruto spoke up first. I was going to the Hokage Tower to see if I could get a quick mission, he said, and I got Itachi to see if he wanted to come with me, for extra protection. He said, not telling a full lie, since he did get Itachi and killing the ninja of the Uchiha clan were their mission, they just didn't go to the Hokage Tower. The woman shrugged her shoulders. Oh, okay, come in the house, take a shower, go to sleep, and I'll have breakfast ready for you in the morning, she said, walking inside the house. After she went inside the house, 3 squads of Anbu and the Hokage appeared in front of them, Naruto report. Sarutobi said. The mission was going along smoothly until Root appeared and started recklessly killing everybody, making noise, and drawing attention to themselves to draw in their prey. They were effective until me and Itachi encountered them fighting Mikoto and Fugaku. I had killed one before, and killed another when I got here. Itachi killed another that was about to kill his mother, Fugaku killed the 4th but was killed in the process, the last one, Kuma or Kairo, or I don't even know what to call him anymore, was the last one to be killed, and I did it. After that I created some shadow clones to look for survivors and found 3 children, all brother and sisters, 1 boy the age of 7 and 2 twin girls the age of 4, they just went in the house with Mikoto and Sasuke, who also survived along with me and Itachi. Naruto said, scratching the back of his neck while he yawned, which was rare because he only did that when he was super sleepy. The Hokage nodded his head and looked around. Okay, I want all of you to clean this place up, he said, commanding his Anbu, excluding Naruto and Itachi. So with the job done, if anyone asks, it was 5 rogue Root members that committed the act, you two understand? He asked both of them, to which they each nodded their heads. I don't know about you, Naruto, but I'm taking a shower, I'll see you tomorrow at breakfast, Itachi said, walking to his house. Now it was only Naruto and Sarutobi. You know what, Hokage Gigi, I've been in Anbu for the last 5 years, I'm tired of the endless missions and the timely hours, I think I'm going to retire and become a Jonin like Kakashi ni Sanengai sensei. I think Itachi would be perfect to take my place as captain of the team, he deserves it and is ready for it, the blonde said, sweeping his hand through his hair, and yawned again. I understand, Naruto-kun, I was going to have you retire from the Anbu after this mission anyway, the paperwork is already filled out, as of tomorrow morning you will be Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha Naruto, elite Jonin of Konoha. You can go enjoy your last night as an Anbu captain. 3 years later, we see our main character Naruto, now the age of 14. He was walking along a dirt road. He has been relaxing the past 3 years, not relaxing as in not training, but relaxing as in his missions weren't as hard as they used to be in Anbu. He now stood at 5 feet and 3 inches. He was wearing a black muscle shirt under a gray padded Anbu-like vest. Over that he wore his standard Jonin vest, which he changed the color to a very dark gray, nearly black. He wore some fingerless gloves that went past his elbows, and over his right arm he wore an Anbu-style forearm bracer, and on the back of the gloves was a metal plate that had the Konoha insignia on it. He wore some regular black cargo pants, and a gray belt that hung loosely around it. He wore black boots, that had little spikes on the bottom. He kept his Anbu katana in the new house he inherited from his father after turning 11, and obtained a new one, that he wore on his waist. The scabbard was red, near the bottom was white tape that wrapped around it, the handle was wrapped in design-less red tape, and the guard was a plain black circle. He wore his headband around his neck and tied the back of his hair in a ponytail. On his right arm was his Anbu tattoo, and on his left arm was a seal that resembled a swirl that held his kunais. Around his neck was a necklace that also had the Anbu-style tattoo hanging off the end of it. Look at my profile picture to get a better look at him. Ever since he became an elite Jonin, the new clan head to the Namikaze clan, and being in the streets, many of the civilians would wave to him, and wish him a good morning or a good afternoon. They were never mean to him, maybe because of him losing his family, the Uchiha, or because he was now on the council, and that only happened when he agreed to take on a Genin team. And speaking of the Uchiha, Mikoto continued to raise her kids, and with Naruto not in Anbu and being home whenever he didn't have a mission, he helped most of the time. When she wasn't helping the children with whatever, she was training herself to get back into shape, since she wanted to better protect her new family. She didn't go back to being an active ninja but just trained, as she was the new clan head of the Uchiha clan. Sasuke continued to go to the academy. He was now 12 and he was doing surprisingly well considering the fact that his family was nearly wiped off the face of the earth. He always says that at least he has his brothers, and his mother that are here and there for him. His graduation from the academy was going to be in a couple of weeks, so he eventually be one of the newest Jonins of Konoha. He was around the skill of a mid-chunin, since both Itachi and Naruto trained him whenever they weren't training Daisuke, Mai, or Kai. Remember Daisuke the little boy? He was now 10 years old, and was always trying to ask either Naruto or Itachi for training so he could get stronger to better protect himself and his sisters. He was going to the academy and is the top of his class, and has been since the term started. He is at high genin level and will only continue to grow stronger. Mai and Kai recently turned 7 and each made Naruto and Itachi their other brothers. Mai liked Naruto the most while Kai liked Itachi the most. And each of the guys trained their individual sisters when they had the time. They are at mid-genin level, and can already do one of the 3 academy graduation ninjutsus, the Kamarimi. Itachi stayed in Anbu, until about 3 weeks ago. He had been on missions, left and right after Naruto gave him the title of captain of the team. He also had to work with strangers, other than Yugo, Neko, who wanted to stay longer, for some reason. And speaking of Yugo, they recently went on a date. It was a nice moonlit walk through the park, after having dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in the village. The ironic thing was they could both afford it easily with their Anbu salary. Anko continues to work with Ibiki in the interrogation and torture section of Anbu, and Kurenai is looking forward to trying out for the Jonin exams. Remember the picture of that one chick in the bedroom of Anko? Inuzuka Hana? Well, she was introduced to Naruto about half a year ago. She had thought he was cute for his age, which was about 12, and was dumbfounded with the fact that he was a Jonin, while she was 17 and wasn't even a Jonin yet. She was now 18 and decided to stay a Chunin since she loved working with animals and being a veterinarian for them. He looked to the sky in thought, and now that he thought about it, she was the only one that was a Chunin, without trying to go up a rank like Kurenai was. I'm going to have a girl of every rank, excluding Genin, he thought, chuckling to himself. Is anything wrong, Naruto-sensei? Said a voice behind him. He turned to see his Genin team. They were 14, showing that they were from the last batch of Genins from last year. They were so surprised to see that their sensei was their exact age. There were 2 girls and 1 boy on his team. One of the girls had dark bluish hair and dark blue eyes to match. She was 4 feet 8 inches and she had a slim build. She wore a simple dark blue shirt and black pants, with dark blue sandals. She had her ninja pouch on the back of her left hip and her shuriken holder on her left leg, showing that she was left-handed. Her hair was short and barely reached her neck, her wore a large B-cup, and she wasn't a fangirl, which was the most important thing to Naruto. Her name was Sakana, fish I love, and you guessed it right, she loved sushi, and after every mission was complete she would ask to go to the sushi place to celebrate. She was the team's ninjutsu specialist and helped with the strategies. The other girl had silver hair and pupil-less white eyes, showing she was a Hyuga, and Naruto still can't understand why her hair is silver. She was 4 feet and 7 inches, and also had a slim build. She wore some dark gray pants and a dark gray shirt. She wore black sandals. Her ninja pouch was on the back of her right hip, and her shuriken holder was on her right and left legs, showing she was ambidextrous. Unlike her teammate I, her hair was long and reached the middle of her back. Her wore a small C-cup. Her headband was around her forehead, over her cursed seal, meaning that she was in the branch family, and when Naruto learned that she was going to be on his team, he told the Hyugas that they should not activate her curse seal under any circumstances or they'll face his wrath, and they listened since he was very powerful and didn't underestimate his strength not one bit. Her name was Hyuga Hinode, Sunrise. And she was grateful for what Naruto did for her. She was the team's taijutsu and fuinjutsu specialist. The last member of Naruto's team was the boy. He had emerald green eyes, and short black hair. He was 5 feet, and had a slim and athletic physique. He was getting muscles but he still had to work on them. He wore a black shirt under his dark green jacket, and dark green cargo shorts, with black boots. On the front of his boots were slots for his hidden knives, and when he added chakra to them the knives would come out, and he would kick people and it would hurt, a lot. He had gloves that also had metal plates on the back like Naruto, but it didn't have the Konoha insignia on it. He wore his headband around his right arm, and his name was Chikyu, Earth, Heigashi, Fierce. Believe it or not, but he was the team's genjutsu and kenjutsu specialist. They all could do tai, gen, nin, fuin, ken, and strategies excellent, but their favorites are what they have listed. Ai's elemental affinity is water and wind, Hinode's elemental affinity is lightning and fire, and Heigashi's affinity is fire and earth, so they all have all 5 of the elemental affinities. How convenient for Naruto, because now he could pass down most, if not, all of his knowledge to his students. All of their skill level is around high chunin, and they're continuing to grow in strength. Naruto looked at his silver-haired student. No, Chan, nothing is wrong, just thinking about what I've gained after gaining you as my students last year, he said, resisting the urge to rub her head. He turned his head when he heard the sound of people talking and looked ahead of him and saw the town where they had to meet their client. Finally, about time we got here. If I had to walk another mile I would have committed seppuku. Heigashi said, throwing his hands in the air, as they passed the village gates. The 2 girls resisted their need to giggle at Heigashi's antics, and Naruto chuckled at his friend's antics, but stopped after a second and glared at him. What was that, Heigashi? Did I hear you say you want to run a mile? Naruto said, stopping his glare to open his ears and lean towards the boy. Heigashi started sweating and gulped. No, Naruto-sensei, I was just saying what a nice day it was, a perfect day to walk in the forest, he said, waving his hands in front of his face and shaking his head at the same time. This time the girls did giggle and Naruto patted the black-haired boy's shoulder. It's okay, I feel the same way, now let's see what our client wants us to do, he said, jumping on the roof of the nearest building. He looked west and led his team to the house of the team's client. Naruto dropped in front of a medium-sized house, and knocked on the door. After a couple of seconds they all heard the voice of a woman from behind the door. Wait a minute, I need to, put my face on, the lady said, making Naruto and his team sweat drop at the way she said it. The blonde sensei turned to Hinode. Check what she's doing, don't worry, I won't get angry at you for peeking on somebody, he reassured her, and she nodded and activated her Byakugan. Sensei, she put a couch in front of the door, and now she's dragging her table in front of the door, Hinode said, making her teammates' sweat drop more. Anybody else in the house? I asked, looking at the second floor of the house, wondering if she actually saw somebody in the window just now. Hinode nodded her head. Yeah, 2 kids are upstairs, they look around the ages of 6 and 7, she said as she continued to watch the women stack things in front of the door. Heigashi grew tired of the woman's actions, and knocked on the door again. Don't worry ma'am, we're ninjas from Konoha and we just want to finish our mission quickly, we are not going to hurt you, he said, making Naruto nod his head in acceptance. They waited there for another minute before they heard the sound of moving furniture and a couple more minutes before the long series of unlocking of the locks, making Naruto and his team sweat drop at the amount of clicking they heard. I leaned toward Hinode. You would think she lives in a vault or something, she whispered, making Hinode giggle a little. Oh, you have no idea, Hinode thought as the lady cracked the door open a little. Did you say Konoha ninjas? She asked slowly and stuttering in the beginning. The ninjas nodded their heads and the lady swung the door open fully. Well, why didn't you say so? Come on in. I have much to tell you about, she said, her bashfulness gone and her bold and prideful behavior coming to the surface. The team of shinobi face faulted but got back up a second later, dusting themselves off and entered the house. They each gasped in shock and surprise. Even Hinode, who had already seen it, was still surprised how the house looked from the inside. The house was filled with paintings and even sculptures made of fine basalt, obsidian, and other various materials, and even some metals. It was absolutely beautiful. Naruto stopped looking at the priceless paintings and sculptures and turned to the women. These are beautiful and expertly created. Did you do them yourself? He asked as his students continued looking at the art. She smiled and nodded her head. Why, yes I did. She said until she realized something. Oh, how rude of me. My name is Hamazaki Ayumi. It's very nice to meet you, she said, extending her hand toward Naruto. She was 5 feet and 7 inches. Her hair was a light and faded blonde, much like Tsunade of the Sannin. She was wearing a white kimono with pink flower petals falling down the left of it. She wasn't wearing any sandals and her hair was done in a short ponytail. Her were a large D cup, and her waist was small and slim. Her figure was that of an hourglass. She was quite an attractive woman, at the age of 32. Namikaze Naruto, and I feel the same way. This is my team. The one with the silver hair is Hinode-chan, the one with the dark blue hair is Ai-chan, and the boy is Higashi-kun, he said as each of his students bowed to the women. She gasped, but you're all so young, are you sure you can handle the mission? Ayumi asked, worried about their safety. Higashi grew irritated at the jab at his skills because of his age, but before he could tell Ayumi what he thought of the comment, Naruto covered his mouth, sensing that he was going to say something. Don't worry ma'am, we can complete the mission. So, what is it? He said, letting go of Higashi's mouth, and stopping the girls from giggling, as they all got a little serious. It's my husband, he's been taken by a group of ninjas. They want my paintings and sculptures in exchange for my husband. They said that just stealing the art would take the fun out of their whole operation, those bastards. She said the last part softly while looking down at her feet. She lifted her head quickly and looked Naruto right in the eye. You have to get him back, she said, frantically missing her husband. Don't worry, we'll bring him back. Where is it that the shinobi have him and how many are there? He asked, crossing his arms. They come here every Saturday, telling me to hurry up with the decision or my husband will be killed. It's been like this for the past 2 weeks. Luckily tomorrow is Saturday, and if I was to remember correctly there are 5 of them, from the village of Sand, she said, giving them a small sad smile. Naruto nodded his head in agreement. When Hinode stepped up, did they give you a location to take your art to? And do they give you the proof of life for your husband? She asked as blonde woman nodded. Yes, they do give a proof of life. They bring him every time bound and gagged, showing that he is indeed alive. They then hit him a couple of times so I know it's not an illusion, and they said they will be in the forest on the east side of the village, she said, sitting on her couch in the living room. Naruto and his team nodded. Okay, we'll go handle it immediately, the blonde male said as he turned around and exited the house. His students bowed one more time and followed suit. Naruto went into mission mode. Hinode-chan, use your Byakugan to scan the forest. I-chan, when Hinode finds their location I want you to help me plan the attack. Higashi-kun will cast a genjutsu around their area and we'll quickly dispose of them and take the husband of Ayumi back to her. You 3 understand? He asked, not even looking at his team as they waited for Hinode to spot the enemy, so he didn't see his team nodded their heads. The BlueNet found their targets and they set out to the northeast. Remember team, suppress your chakra in case they have a sensor in the group, he said as he felt their chakra levels drop. He smiled in pride at his team's growth. Minutes later they entered the clearing where the Suna shinobi were camping. It seems they were getting irritated by the wife and wanted to just steal what they wanted instead of doing it the boring way. Quiet yourself, Jinta. The fun will begin as soon as the wife gives us what we want and then we can kill both of them, said the leader of the group. But Seiki, I still don't understand why we can't just kill the bastards now, and take what we want. We're just giving her enough time to call some Konoha shinobi to help her. Jinta said to the now revealed leader. When the man didn't respond, he looked and seen blood all around him. His comrades have been killed. He yelled, and was shaken, until real blood came out of the head of the person shaking him. The assault had begun. With 3 down, Naruto jumped into the clearing and launched a quick series of lightning bolts at the remaining 2, shocking and killing them. He then quickly ran to the only tent in the clearing, which he knew belonged to the leader of the group of Chunin Suna shinobi. He entered and untied the unconscious husband and threw him over his shoulders. Exiting his tent, he nodded to his concealed students and they ran back to the village with their package in possession. 3 hours later, they made it back to the village after giving Ayumi back her husband, and was rewarded with a painting, which was sealed in a scroll and kept by Naruto, who promised to give the painting to the one that would win their next team spar. The team walked into the office of the Hokage and Naruto gave the mission report to the man. Excellent, that's another completed mission for your team, Naruto-kun. You trained them well, he said, puffing on his pipe. Naruto bowed a little to show his respect. Thanks, Gigi, just wait, these 3 will soon become the next legendary 3. The blonde said with pride as his team blushed at the praise given to them. The room was filled with the laughter of the Hokage. I believe your declaration, because at this rate, in just a half a decade they will be close, not there but close. After all, the Densetsu no Sanin were trained by yours truly, he said, puffing out a ring of smoke. Naruto laughed, as was I mean if Jiraiya Oji trained my father to be Hokage, then I could too, he said, chuckling along with his grandfather. So where's Itachi ni, is he on a mission or is he on break? He asked the leader of the village after his team left to go home and shower. He is on a mission, you're going to have to find someone else to train with, my boy, the old man said, as Naruto nodded and left the room in a swirl of wind and water. Asterisk in the streets. Now Naruto was walking in the streets with no thought in mind. He wanted to train at the exact moment, but he was hungry. How could I solve this problem? He thought to himself, as he scratched his head. I think you just got your answer, Kit, the fox said in his head. And just at that second, a kunai flew through the air, slicing in his right cheek. He didn't stop his walking as he knew it was Anko looking to have some fun. Ah, Naru-kun, you do love me, one of his purple-haired goddesses said as she wrapped her arms around his head and leaned into his back, pressing her into it, as she licked his cheek, which was getting difficult with the walking and the wound healing. Anko pouted at the source of her fetish closing up. So what kind of mission did you have, Naru-kun? She said, getting from behind him and walking on the side of him. It was just some ninjas wanting something, but didn't want to take it by force. The idiots wanted to do some kind of ransom drop-off thing, so me and my team just killed them and gave the woman her husband back. Naruto said as they neared the dango stand they would meet on occasions. Naruto looked around the shop and found Kurenai sitting by herself with a cup of tea in her hand. She looked up and smiled seeing Anko and Naruto. It took you too long enough, I've been waiting here ever since I felt your chakra signature enter the village. The red-eyed goddess said looking at Naruto. Naruto rubbed the back of his head as he sat down. I'm sorry, I had to report my mission to the Hokage with my team, you know how it is, he said chuckling nervously as Kurenai leveled him with a small cute glare. It won't happen again, Naruto said as Kurenai smiled and put her cup of tea down. So Nai-chan, you going to get a team of wet behind the ears genin in 2 weeks? Anko asked before ordering a large plate of dango and a cup of sake, with Naruto ordering the same, minus the cup of sake and just ordered some tea. Yeah, I feel like I can do it again, and I hope this team passes, unlike last year's team. Kurenai said shaking her head as she remembered what happened with her team last year. She looked at Naruto nearly envious at his team. So Naru-kun, how is your team? She said. Naruto nearly shivered at her tone. They're alright, they are getting stronger and I'm thankful for that. Hinode is absolutely excellent with her Byakugan. Her Jukin is top-notch and she's in the process to learn more taijutsu styles to incorporate her Jukin into. Her skill in Fuinjutsu is rapidly rising now that her speed and accuracy in drawing the seals has increased. in less than a decade's time, at this pace, she'll be an expert. I wouldn't be surprised if her ancestors were Naras, because she is smart, and knows just what strategy is for what situation, but unlike the Naras she has the reserves to do way more because her ninjutsu library far exceeds what a genin is supposed to know, thanks to me. Not to mention that her reserves are higher than most of the boys in her class. And lastly Higashi, he's trying to be like you, making up his own genjutsus, and it's not just genjutsu that he specializes in, he becoming quite a skilled fighter when it comes to kenjutsu. Naruto said, gloating about his students without even knowing he was gloating about his students, but they did hear a sense of pride in Naruto's voice as he spoke, so he must have known what he was doing. Alright, we get it, your students are skilled, you can stop your bragging now. Anko said with her hands in her face and Kurenai shooting him a big glare, causing Naruto to gulp and apologize by taking her hand and kissing the back of it and apologizing as he did. So Nai-chan, you want to have a quick spar with us after lunch? Anko asked with Naruto nodding his head and giving her the baby fox eyes jutsu. And he already knew that she couldn't resist his eyes and smile when she nodded her head. Great job, Kit, I have trained you well. The Kyuubi said, nodded his head with a sense of pride. The blonde-haired thanked his furry demon, and after lunch they each got up and walked to the nearest training ground to begin their training.